All right, staying with Japan, my next guest says no other country in the world is as well prepared for earthquakes as Japan. Julie Rochman is CEO of the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. This is a nonprofit research organization that looks to reduce the effect of natural disasters, and she joins us now from Tampa, Florida. Julie, thanks so much for joining us. Now, you study at your institution the importance of these strong building codes in detail. Just how strong were Japan's building codes? And do you think, given all the aftershocks and given the magnitude of this particular earthquake and the tsunami, but that they could have been stronger?
Well, the Japanese have done a really good job and are actually leading edge when it comes to codes. For example, in this country, our building codes are really considered minimum life safety standards. All we look to do in this country when it comes to seismic codes are keep the buildings standing long enough to get people out of them. In Japan, they go much further than that. They're actually designing buildings with codes in place to continue to stand and function after the movement of the earth stops. Your question about repeated stresses is a good one, though, because we've seen in New Zealand where codes were good, and they had a relatively severe earthquake last September and another one last month, that repeated stresses, even on well-designed and well-built buildings, can cause them to come down, because at some point, physics will overwhelm even the best of engineering.
Well, on this topic, Julie, so I know that I've read a lot of reports now from various geophysicists who've said that, there's not a lot of data on earthquakes nor subsequent aftershocks, but this is one very, very important data point. Do you think they're reassessing the models now to allow for potentially much bigger earthquakes going forward? I mean, I've seen, a number of estimates now, or a number of forecasts for potential another 7.0 or 8.0 magnitude earthquake in the Pacific area.
Well, that's true. We've seen Chile, we've seen New Zealand, we've seen Japan. So now if you look all around that Pacific Rim, the Ring of Fire, you got to think there's more to come. And the earth moves in Japan all the time. They're used to living with earthquakes. The question is, how well can you build? And we would argue you should build for 7.0s, 8.0s, because we see those in this country as well. But at some point, there's a decision that has to be made by society. How much are you willing to spend to engineer these buildings to stand and stand and stand, rather than to repair between earth movements? So if you design a building to a 7.0, as you know, because you've had experts on for the last several days, a 7.0 versus an 8.0 versus a 9.0, there's a huge magnitude of difference there. And depending on whether it's a thrust or a slip quake, there are all sorts of things that even the best engineering cannot make guarantees that building would stand. But Japan is really far ahead of the United States and many other countries in terms of what they expect from their codes and from the performance of their buildings in case of a quake.
All right, talking about the United States, the Pacific Northwest is potentially at risk of tsunamis, potential aftershocks related to this earthquake. Are they as prepared, and what would they need to do to prepare?
Well, California, Oregon, and Washington actually are as prepared as this country gets. They are our leading edge. Not as well prepared as Japan, but in California, for example, they have annual drills called the Great Shakeout, where children in schools and people really come to a stop and practice and drill on what would happen if there was a major natural disaster related to an earthquake. Oregon and Washington have also, like California, good strong building codes in place. We do not have on the west coast of the United States the same type of tsunami warning systems and flood or inundation height measuring stations that they have in Hawaii and elsewhere. In other words, you could stand in different places on the coast in Hawaii and it would say, if there was an inundation or a flood or tsunami of this height, you're not high enough, seek higher ground, or you're high enough at this point. We don't have those kinds of markers along the Pacific coast.
All right, Julie, thank you so much for joining us. Wish we could keep you longer, perhaps an update coming up soon. Maybe they'll revisit some of those codes.